Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by again. And again, my apologies for being a little slow in getting back to the videos. It wasn't intentional. As those of you who heard my last video prior to this one know, I've taken advantage of the inexpensive rentals that are available right now in the city and moved after 11 years. I'm a renter, just by nature, and I always prefer that. And I like the place where I was, but this is less expensive and has a beautiful view, and I'm very happy with it. And I'm being introduced to a new section of the city. I've been through it many times, but now I'm walking it. It's a completely different experience and an interesting one. So that would not have been enough to slow me down, but then I had real problems with my eyesight. Let's just say it was a long story, but once I identified what the problem was, and then I did my due diligence and found a good ophthalmologist, since my ophthalmologist had passed away, the one I'd used in the past. Found a new one, and Dr. Ronaldo Chanis did a really super job of getting me through this period, and it's all fine. I'm great. I can now see better than I've seen in a very long time, and I am delighted. For those of you who are going to want to know what it was, I had cataracts in the past, and those were taken out, and that was a big shift. And a very useful one. And cataracts can't grow back. But there's a portion, about a third, roughly more or less, of people who've had cataracts who months later or years later have a cloudiness of vision that occurs. And it can be dealt with very easily and quickly if you have the right equipment, a special laser for it, and the right ophthalmologist who knows what he's doing. And I managed to find both of them and get it all lined up. And it was taken care of in a matter of about 15 minutes. I spent more time with drops in my eyes than I did actually with the laser, and it's totally painless. So that has done a super job and really brought home to me the fact that it had been getting worse all the time, and it was so gradual that it had to get really serious before I was moved to action. Now I'm very happy that I was so moved, because it has made a huge difference, and I wish I'd noticed it 2 or 3 months ago. In any event, here I am again. It's good to be back with you. Now, this one is in response to some queries that have come in by email. I was going to do a sort of summary statement on real estate, but I'm going to instead focus on one particular matter that's been brought up by those who've been writing me recently. And it's true of this time of year. Commonly, this is October in 2018, for those of you who are going to see it in 6 months or a year or whatever. It's at this time that I start getting messages from people saying that they would like a short-term furnished rental for 3 or 4 months. And this is the most difficult time of year to do that, because naturally it's the high season for people coming down from the north, from North America and from Europe, to spend winter months down here. And so there's an increased demand for rentals to begin with. And another matter that isn't always taken into account is that quite a few Americans and Canadians, again particularly, in past years have come down and have had the resources that they've been able to purchase a place, usually a condo in the beach area, but sometimes in the city, and still have their home up north. And they come down 4 to 6 months of the year, depending on what their situation is, and live here. And then the rest of the year, they rent out their property. So a few months ago, there had been a lot of those properties available for rent. But now is when they're coming down for their snowbirds, as we call them up north. And they're arriving already, and they'll continue to arrive over the next few weeks. And when they come, then their properties go off the rental list. So it isn't impossible at all. You can find them. But again, as in most locations around the world, people prefer a 1-year lease. That's available anytime, anywhere. But for short-term leases, it's always a little bit more complex, and it usually means it's a little bit more expensive, simply because of the time of year that you're coming. So try to keep that in mind. I know it's frustrating to some people who just seem to think that, well, it should be just as easy now as any other time, when in fact, it isn't as easy. It's more expensive. It's not impossible at all. It's not even hard. It just costs a little more money and finding the exact place you want. Now, one thing that Americans and Canadians, and I trust other nations as well, are used to is what I would normally call in the U.S. an apartment house. And that's a structure owned by one company. It might have 30 or 40 or 50 units. It might have 300, all of them for rent. That's, to me, an apartment house. And if it's a condominium, that's a completely different story. Here in Panama, the term apartment house is used, but it refers to a condominium. And they don't have the apartment houses that we're used to in some other nations. So you just can't walk in the door of such an entity here and say, well, what do you have available for rent? Instead, the rentals, and there are plenty of them, are by condo owners, who in turn either furnish or unfurnished. They have their choice. They rent their apartments out for a full year. So it's a kind of investment for them, and quite successful. But that is a little bit of a frustration to people because they expect what they had back home, and for whatever reason, it has not caught on here. I think probably in the past decades, there were probably rent control laws or one thing or another in the city that may have made that unattractive to people. But in any event, it's something that I encourage developers here to give thought to, and I've been pushing it for a long time, and one of these days maybe I can convince one of them to do it. But of course, it's a different kind of operation than a condominium. So in any event, that is not available. We have to go through them one at a time, basically. And that's why when you come to rent, instead of just walking into one establishment and looking at that and then finding out which apartments here are available, here the agent has to set up appointments with you, with the owner or with the owner's agent at different properties, and you go and you visit. It's more time consuming. It's a little bit more involved. The agent picks you up and takes you around. It's not a big problem for you, but it really does take up the agent's time and effort, which is why it's very important for you as you come down, and as soon as you can, really get a grip on what it is you want and what you're looking for, so that she or he can find the right place. And they will eventually, if it's within reason. So that's what I wanted to get across to a lot of people who are interested in renting for a short-term basis during this particular period of the year. But any period of the year, it's always going to be, there are going to be fewer places available, and they're going to be somewhat more expensive than is the case when you're willing to make a one-year rental on it. So that's just what I wanted to mention. I'd also say that for rentals that are going to go through January, it's best to get them straightened out as soon as you can, because of the big crowds expected in the last 2 weeks of January for World Youth Day, when just about everything's going to fill up, I suspect. There will be room, of course, but then things will be even more expensive. The better thing to do is to get the rental, if you're going to be here for a while, established well in advance of that, and covering that period, so you don't have to worry about it. Not a big deal, but it is useful. And it's also good to know that if you're looking for a rental, in the foreseeable future, the not too distant future, the sooner you come down, the better it is. Because again, as we get into the winter months up north, the situation begins to change. And although we have a lot of available properties at reasonable prices right at the moment, that will begin to change a bit during this period. It may only be the difference of $100 or $200 a month, but it's $100 or $200 a month. So if you can come down, the earlier the better to lock those in. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I'm going to be following this one up very quickly with what I had promised from the last one, which is sort of a general summary, and I do mean a summary, of the real estate situation and my strong advice as to what to do if you're interested, and how I might be able to help you do that in a way that's not going to, you don't pay me. Where it doesn't cost you money. That's the important thing. Because it's a great opportunity. And in 14 years, I've never done anything like it. So I'm doing it now because I really think it's incredibly good time, either for buying or for renting. And why should you miss it? But I'll discuss that more in the summary to come. Thanks for your patience. We'll get this one out of the way. Hopefully that other one, if you're hearing this now, and you haven't heard the next one, you'll find it at the channel. It'll come right after this by tomorrow, I suspect. I would have it up. And then following that, we'll finally have that one I've been talking about, the introduction to Panama City. But that's coming down the road, too. Thank you for your patience, and I hope the new setup here. I'm just getting things organized for videos. I hope it's decent and you can hear me and understand me well. So in any event, thanks very much for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you again. Whoops, just a minute. I always forget to do this, but you're supposed to do it with a YouTube video, so here it is. If you like what you hear and you'd like to hear it more often, subscribe. And when you do, if you do, right beside the subscribe button is a little bell. If you click on that, it will ring, or so it looks, and you will receive immediate notification of any new videos. This avoids YouTube's hit and miss approach sometimes to getting out new videos to subscribers. So if you want it that way, you want to be sure you don't miss any, just click the bell after you subscribe. Thanks again, and thank you for your patience.